The chamber of the Galactic Council had witnessed the rise and fall of empires older than most stars in the sky, but on this day, something felt off. It wasn't the scale. 800 representatives sat in their assigned tiers, each species occupying its designated arc beneath the vast domed ceiling. It wasn't the technology either. Translation pillars hummed softly, converting hundreds of languages into a single shared understanding. No, what unsettled the room was far more subtle. It was the confidence in Ambassador Vyrex's stride. He moved toward the central platform like a conqueror walking through a battlefield he had already won. His armor shimmered with ceremonial plating, each etched line marking a world his empire had absorbed. Behind him, attendants carried data slates filled with projections, conquest reports, and logistical plans already prepared for execution. He did not look like a diplomat. He looked like a man announcing something irreversible. From the highest tier, Elder Talon observed in silence. His species had outlived entire civilizations, and his expression rarely changed anymore. But even he leaned forward slightly, his gaze sharpening as Vyrex stepped into the light. "Honored members of the council," Vyrex began, his voice amplified across the endless hall, smooth and controlled. "The Dominion of Karth has come to inform you of a territorial expansion." A few delegates shifted. That alone was not unusual. Expansion announcements were routine. Claims were filed, borders adjusted, disputes negotiated. But something in the tone was wrong. There was no request. No negotiation. Only certainty. "We have identified a system of strategic value," Vyrex continued. "A system rich in resources, ideally positioned for further development. It will be brought under Dominion control effective immediately." A faint murmur spread through the chamber. Still normal. Still expected. Then he added, almost casually, "The native species will be relocated." That was when the room changed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just changed. Several delegates went completely still. A few others stopped mid-motion, their limbs frozen as if time itself had hesitated. One representative from a crystalline species dimmed noticeably, their internal light flickering in a way that suggested sudden distress. Elder Talon's fingers tightened ever so slightly on the armrest of his seat. "Ambassador Vyrex," he said, his voice calm, measured, ancient. "For the record, please specify the system in question." Vyrex smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "The system designated Sol," he said. "Specifically, the third planet. The inhabitants refer to it as Earth." The silence that followed was absolute. Not a whisper. Not a movement. 800 representatives, across 800 species, simply stopped. Somewhere in the lower tiers, a data slate slipped from someone's grasp and struck the floor. The sound echoed far louder than it should have. A delegate near the center, tall, composed, known for mediating conflicts between hostile species, slowly leaned forward, staring at Vyrex as if trying to determine whether this was some kind of elaborate joke. "It wasn't. You intend," the delegate said carefully, "to relocate the humans." "Yes," Vyrex replied, as if confirming something trivial. "They are technologically insignificant. Their infrastructure is primitive. Their military capacity is negligible. Integration will be efficient." A sharp, involuntary sound came from the left side of the chamber. Someone had actually laughed. Not in amusement. In disbelief. Another delegate rose halfway from their seat before sitting back down again, their movements unsteady. A third began rapidly accessing their console, fingers moving faster with each passing second. Elder Talon's voice cut through the tension. "Ambassador," he said, slower now, heavier. "Has your government reviewed all available records regarding this system?" "Of course," Vyrex answered immediately. "We have conducted a full military analysis. There is nothing in their current capabilities that presents a threat to Dominion forces." A ripple moved through the hall. Not relief. Something closer to dread. "Military analysis," someone whispered, too quietly for most to hear. "Only military." Elder Talon closed his eyes for a brief moment, as if weighing something far older than the discussion itself. When he opened them again, the faintest trace of something unreadable lingered there. Ambassador Virex, he said, I will ask you once more. Are you absolutely certain your Dominion wishes to proceed with this action? There was no hesitation. Completely, Virex replied. We have subjugated 41 species in the last century. None have resisted beyond initial engagement. This will be no different. A long pause followed. Then, slowly, deliberately, Elder Talon inclined his head. Very well, he said. The words settled over the chamber like a verdict. The Council acknowledges your declaration. We will not interfere. That got a reaction. Virex frowned slightly. You will not support this expansion? We will not interfere, Talon repeated. Something in his tone made several delegates look away. A low murmur began to spread, faster this time, more urgent. Conversations sparked in dozens of languages at once, overlapping, colliding, rising in intensity. Virex's confidence wavered for the first time. I fail to understand the concern, he said louder now. This is a standard operation. The species is barely spacefaring. Their vessels cannot even. Ambassador. The single word stopped him. Talon had not raised his voice. He didn't need to. Your statement has been recorded, the elder continued. This session is concluded. The ceremonial chime rang out once. Then again. And a third time. Representatives began to stand. Not slowly. Not casually. They moved with purpose, gathering their data, initiating communications, leaving their positions far more quickly than protocol normally allowed. Some were already transmitting messages before they reached the exits. Others didn't speak at all, their silence heavier than any words. Virex remained at the platform, watching as the chamber emptied around him. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. There should have been debate, opposition, perhaps even admiration. Not this. Not whatever this was. As the last clusters of delegates disappeared through the massive archways, he noticed something else. No one had argued with him. No one had tried to stop him. They had simply stepped aside. From the upper tier, Elder Talon rose slowly, turning to leave through a private passage. One of his aides approached, voice low. Elder, they asked quietly, should we prepare the archives? Talon did not stop walking. Yes, he said. A brief pause. Begin with the extinction templates. The aide hesitated. For the humans? Talon's expression did not change. No, he replied. For the Dominion. The lower archives of the Council complex were older than most civilizations still alive. They stretched deep beneath the surface of Nexus Prime, carved long before the current galactic order had taken shape. Few were granted access, and fewer still chose to come here willingly. The air was still, heavy with the quiet weight of recorded history, victories, extinctions, mistakes. Dr. Yalara moved through the dim corridors with practiced ease. Her species did not sleep, which made her particularly suited for long hours among the archives. It also meant she had spent more time than most studying the records others preferred to forget. Tonight, the facility felt different. Not because of what was here, but because of what was about to be needed again. She reached the central chamber and activated the primary console. Holographic interfaces flickered to life around her, layers of classified files unfolding in silent suspension. Most were locked behind council-level encryption, some behind restrictions so severe they required unanimous elder authorization. She bypassed them all without hesitation. Archivist clearance, she said calmly. Emergency override protocol. A brief pause. Then the system responded. Override accepted. Reason? Yalara didn't look away from the expanding data fields. Imminent extinction event, she replied. The system processed that for less than a second. Access granted. Thousands of files shifted, reorganizing themselves based on relevance. Red markers appeared beside several classifications, records that had not been accessed in decades. She selected one. The designation pulsed faintly in the air. Ultra 7. Restricted contact events, Sol System. Even now, after everything she had studied, the title alone made her pause. Most species in the Council knew the rule. They just didn't know why it existed. Yalara exhaled slowly, then issued the command. Begin playback. The chamber darkened as the first recording came to life. A star appeared, then a system, then a planet, blue, green, deceptively calm. Historical note. The archive intoned, its voice neutral and precise. The following records document first contact between galactic civilization and the species known as humans. Warning: content contains military conflict of extreme classification. Yalara's tendrils shifted faintly in color, a reflex she no longer bothered to suppress. She had seen this before. It never became easier. Display initial assessment, she said. Text formed in the air, translated automatically into standard council language. Species designation, human technological level, early spacefaring military capability, minimal threat assessment, negligible recommended action, standard conquest protocol estimated resistance duration, 72 hours. Yalara almost closed the file right there. Not because it was incorrect. Because it was so confidently wrong. Continue, she said quietly. The perspective shifted. Space near a pale gray satellite, the humans called it Luna. The void was filled with massive vessels, their hulls layered with weapons capable of breaking continents, their formations precise and overwhelming. The Ketheri hegemony. At the time, they had been considered unstoppable. 400 controlled systems. Military doctrines studied across the galaxy. A record of victories so complete that resistance was often seen as pointless. Below them, scattered and disorganized, were the human defenses. Small ships. Unimpressive. Fragile. They moved like insects compared to the structured lines of the invading fleet. The attack began exactly as predicted. Energy discharges lit the darkness. Human vessels vanished in bursts of light, erased before they could even return fire. Defensive platforms collapsed within minutes. Communication signals spiked, then fragmented. It was efficient. Expected. Display time index, Yalara said. Battle plus 6 hours. The scene shifted. The destruction continued, but something else had changed. The human ships were no longer moving the same way. They were still outmatched. Still taking losses. But their patterns weren't consistent. They approached from angles that didn't align with standard engagement logic. They used debris fields for cover, drifting wreckage turned into temporary shields. Damaged vessels continued fighting long after they should have been disabled. Yalara leaned closer. Display intercepted communications. A burst of static. Then a voice. Strained. Human. They cycle every 47 seconds. Repeat, 47. Target during recharge. Adjust vectors, stop flying straight into their firing arcs. The transmission cut. Another replaced it almost immediately. New approach pattern uploaded. Sync when ready. If you can't sync, watch and copy. Don't wait for orders, just adapt. Yalara felt the familiar tightening in her chest. This was the moment. Not when the humans won. When they refused to lose the way everyone else did. Advance to 12 hours, she said. The shift was undeniable now. The humans were still losing ships. But they were learning faster than the hegemony could adjust. Attack runs became unpredictable. Formations dissolved into fluid, decentralized movements. Individual pilots made decisions that should have required command authorization, but there was no delay, no hesitation. They weren't waiting. They were thinking. Analyze behavioral pattern, Yalara requested. Human forces exhibit accelerated tactical adaptation, the archive responded. Estimated rate exceeds all known military learning models. Advance. 18 hours. The difference was wrong. Human ships now carried modifications, visible even through the distortion of battle. Weapon signatures appeared that hadn't existed at the start of the engagement. Some fired in irregular bursts, others in patterns that bypassed shield harmonics entirely. Source of modification? Yalara asked. Unknown. Likely field adaptation using available materials and captured components. In less than a day, she whispered. The archive did not respond. 24 hours. The hegemony lines were no longer advancing. They were holding, then slowly pulling back. Fragments of their communications surfaced, confused, disjointed. Their weapons aren't in our database. They're targeting structural weak points. How are they predicting our movements? Yalara closed her eyes briefly. They always sounded the same at this stage. Confused. Not afraid yet. Just unable to understand what was happening. Continue playback, she said. The recording obeyed. And the war, which had been expected to end in 3 days, kept going. The recordings did not skip forward immediately. They lingered. Because what followed was not a single turning point, not one decisive moment where the outcome flipped. It was something far more unsettling. It was gradual. Advanced to 48 hours, Yalara said. The battlefield reformed around her. The hegemony fleet was still dominant in size, still superior in raw firepower. But their formations had changed. What had once been clean, geometric precision was now strained. Lines bent where they should have held. Ships repositioned more frequently than doctrine allowed. They were reacting. That alone was enough to mark the beginning of the end. The human vessels, by contrast, looked nothing like they had at the start of the engagement. They moved without pattern, and yet with perfect purpose. Clusters formed and dissolved in seconds. Ships broke formation not out of panic, but intent. They exploited gaps before those gaps fully existed, striking at angles that forced the hegemony to divide their fire. Display command structure, Yalara said. Unable to identify centralized command, the archive replied. Clarify. Human forces are operating on distributed decision-making. No single command vessel detected. Yalara stared at the projection. No command at all? Correction. Command authority appears to be shared across all units. For a moment, the only sound in the chamber was the distant echo of weapons fire from a battle that had taken place 2 centuries ago. Then she exhaled slowly. Continue. The next sequence showed something the initial reports had failed to capture. Human ships weren't just adapting tactics. They were changing themselves. A damaged vessel drifted through a debris field, its hull torn open. By all metrics, it should have been dead in space. Instead, smaller craft converged around it. Pieces of wreckage, some human, some clearly not, were pulled into position, fused, reconfigured. Within minutes, the ship re-entered the battle. Different. Stronger. Analyze modification, Yalara said. Composite construction, the archive responded. Human and hegemony components integrated. Functionality exceeds original design parameters. They're rebuilding mid-engagement, she murmured. Confirmed. Another sequence. A hegemony cruiser unleashed a full barrage at a cluster of human fighters. The explosion should have ended the encounter. Instead, seconds later, the fighters re-emerged, scarred, partially damaged, but still operational. They had adjusted. Their approach vectors shifted just enough to reduce impact. Their formations spread at the exact moment required to minimize losses. They weren't reacting after the attack. They were anticipating it. Advanced to 72 hours, Yalara said quietly. There was a brief pause. Then the archive complied. The projection stabilized, and for a moment, Yalara didn't recognize what she was seeing. The hegemony fleet was retreating. Not in full disarray. Not yet. But the forward lines had pulled back significantly. Defensive postures had replaced offensive formations. Support vessels clustered tighter, guarded more heavily. And the humans were advancing. Not recklessly. Not chaotically. Deliberately. Every movement calculated. Every strike precise. Display hegemony communications, she said. Fragments filled the chamber, overlapping in urgency. Unexpected resistance escalating. Requesting immediate reinforcements. Enemy adaptation rate exceeds predictive models. We are losing ships faster than projected. Yalara watched as one transmission cut through the rest, clearer than the others. A command voice. Controlled, but strained. Report, it demanded. A response followed, hesitant. Human forces have modified captured technology, sir. Their weapon outputs have increased by an estimated 30%. Their targeting systems, are improving with each engagement. Impossible. Their technological base. Sir, with respect, their technological base is no longer relevant. The silence that followed that statement lingered longer than any explosion. Yalara felt it even now. The moment realization began to form. Advance, she said. Days passed in seconds. Each new segment reinforced the same pattern. The hegemony adapted. The humans adapted faster. The hegemony escalated. The humans repurposed. Weapons were captured, studied, redeployed. Defensive systems were analyzed and bypassed. Entire tactical doctrines became obsolete within hours of being deployed. And through it all, the humans never stopped. No pause. No reset. Just continuous learning. Display final engagement, Yalara said. The scene shifted one last time. A different system now. Not Earth. Not Luna. The hegemony homeworld. Its defensive grid filled the space around it. Layers of shielding, fleets positioned in depth, weapons platforms aligned for maximum coverage. Everything they had left. Everything they could still protect. And surrounding it, human ships. Thousands of them. Larger than before. More advanced. Their designs no longer resembled the fragile vessels from the beginning of the war. They were something else now. Something built not just from human ingenuity, but from everything they had taken, learned, and improved. Fleet composition? Yalara asked. 42% original human design, the archive replied. 33% modified hegemony technology. 25% unknown origin. Unknown. Components do not match any recorded database. Yalara didn't question it further. By this point, she already understood. The battle began. It was not long. The hegemony defenses fired with everything they had left. Planetary weapons discharged at maximum output. Fleet formations executed their final protocols with precision born from centuries of warfare. It didn't matter. Human strikes bypassed shielding frequencies within minutes. Coordinated attacks dismantled key systems before they could be reinforced. Entire segments of the defense grid went dark in rapid succession. There was no chaos. No rage. Just efficiency. Like a process reaching its conclusion. Display surrender transmission, Yalara said softly. The projection shifted. A signal broadcast from the hegemony command structure, fragmented but intact. This is hegemony prime command. The pause. We surrender, unconditionally. For the first time since the playback began, there was something unmistakable in the voice. We request mercy for civilian populations. Silence followed. A response. Immediate. Human. Surrender acknowledged. Civilian populations will not be harmed. Military forces will stand down. Further instructions will follow. No hesitation. No negotiation. Just acceptance. Yalara remained still as the recording ended. For a long moment, the chamber returned to silence. Then she spoke almost to herself. They won. Confirmed, the archive replied. She shook her head slightly. No, she said. That's not the part that matters. Her gaze lingered on the empty space where the battle had been. They stopped. The chamber remained quiet for a long time after the final transmission faded. Yalara did not immediately call the next file. She already knew what it would show. That was the part most species never understood. They assumed the danger ended with victory. That once the humans won, the story was over. It wasn't. That was when the real pattern began. Display post-conflict summary, she said at last. The archive responded instantly. Conflict designation, Earth Integration War 1. Outcome, total military defeat of Ketheri hegemony. Civilian population, preserved. Military command structure, dismantled. Industrial capacity, repurposed. The wording was precise. Careful. Almost clinical. Display current status of Ketheri species. A new set of images replaced the battlefield. Green fields stretched under a warm sun. Structured agricultural zones spread across multiple worlds. Creatures that had once commanded war fleets now moved through rows of cultivation equipment, their forms calmer, slower. No weapons. No warships. No threat. Population stable, the archive continued. Quality of life indicators increased. Conflict recurrence probability negligible. Yalara studied the scene. They didn't destroy them, she said quietly. Confirmed. They changed them. The archive did not answer. It didn't need to. Display additional cases. The chamber flickered as more records surfaced. Different species. Different wars. The same beginning. A confident empire. A calculated invasion. A belief that humans were weak. The same middle. Initial victories. Sudden resistance. Rapid human adaptation. The same ending. Defeat. Survival. Transformation. Case 2, the archive intoned. Devourers of Sarkhan. Duration of conflict, 8 standard months. Outcome, total military collapse. Species converted to resource extraction and mining operations. Population growth, positive. Case 3, Jean Collective. Duration, 11 standard months. Outcome, hive coordination disrupted. Surviving units restructured into distributed research networks. Contribution to galactic communication systems, significant. Yalara let the images cycle. World after world. Species after species. None extinct. None dominant. All redirected. She felt that familiar unease settle in again. Because this wasn't conquest. Not in any form the Council had ever defined. Summarize pattern, she said. The archive processed for a fraction of a second. All recorded conflicts involving human defensive action follow consistent progression. Phase 1, underestimation by opposing force. Phase 2, initial human losses. Phase 3, accelerated adaptation. Phase 4, technological assimilation. Phase 5, decisive counteroffensive. Phase 6, opponent surrender. Phase 7, post-conflict restructuring of opposing civilization. Yalara closed her eyes briefly. A perfect sequence. Repeated. Unbroken. How many recorded cases? She asked. 3 confirmed major conflicts. Multiple minor engagements with similar characteristics. And in every case, opposing species survives, the archive finished. That was the part that unsettled her the most. Not the victories. Not the power. The consistency. The restraint. Why? She asked, more to herself than the system. Why not eliminate the threat permanently? The archive remained silent for a moment. No definitive answer in recorded data. Yalara let out a slow breath. Of course not. That answer wasn't in the battles. It was in the choice after them. She turned back to the main console, her movements more urgent now. Prepare data packets, she ordered. Include full tactical analysis, historical summaries, and behavioral patterns. Priority distribution to all council members. Warning, the archive replied. Files classified under highest restriction. Distribution requires elder authorization. Override, Yalara said immediately. Archivist emergency protocol. Imminent species extinction event. The pause. Override accepted. Preparing transmission. Streams of data began to compile, compress, and organize into packets ready for galactic relay. Yalara watched them form, her thoughts already moving ahead. The Dominion of Karth. 41 conquered species. Centuries of undefeated campaigns. They would arrive at Earth with confidence. With certainty. With the belief that this time would be different. It never was. She hesitated for only a second before adding one final instruction. Append personal note, she said. The system acknowledged. Recording. Yalara chose her words carefully. The humans do not fight for conquest. They do not fight for destruction. They fight to end threats permanently, without ending the species that create them. She paused, then added more quietly, they do not lose twice. The transmission completed. Across the galaxy, secure channels activated as the data packets were sent to every council member, every major government, every species that understood what those files meant. Evacuation orders would already be underway. Borders would close. All contact with Dominion space would begin to fade. Yalara stepped back from the console. Too late, she thought. It was always too late by the time the archives were opened. Far above, in the council chamber now nearly empty, the last echoes of conversation had faded into silence. And far beyond that, a fleet was already moving, confident, unstoppable, unaware, toward a system that had ended empires far greater than theirs. Yalara dimmed the displays one by one. The final light flickered out, leaving the chamber in darkness. Only one file remained active. Still marked, after all this time, with a single advisory status. Untouchable. Admiral Sarah Chin did not look impressed. The message hovered in the center of the command chamber, its polished symbols and formal language carrying the unmistakable tone of authority that empires always seemed to favor. It demanded surrender. It promised relocation. It assumed compliance. Around her, the Solar Defense Council stood in silence, eyes fixed on the projection as it completed its final line of translation. Response required within 72 hours. The message faded. No one spoke for a moment. Then someone exhaled. Not in fear. In mild annoyance. General Marcus Hale leaned back slightly, rubbing his jaw as if he had just heard something inconvenient rather than threatening. They really said relocation, he muttered. A few officers exchanged glances. Not nervous. Not even tense. Just tired. Admiral Chen folded her arms, her gaze still resting on the space where the message had been. 72 hours, she repeated. General Hale gave a quiet huff of amusement. That's optimistic. General, Chen said without looking at him. Yes, Admiral? Is there anything in that message that concerns you? Hale considered it for a second. No, he said simply. A faint ripple of agreement moved through the room. Not arrogance. Assessment. Chen nodded once. Good, she said. Then we proceed accordingly. She turned slightly, activating the main system display. The solar map expanded outward, Earth at the center, orbital infrastructure layered in quiet complexity, traffic routes glowing faintly with civilian movement. Peaceful. At least on the surface. Open channel, she ordered. A communications officer moved instantly. Channel ready, Admiral. Chen stepped forward. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Solar Defense Force, she said, her voice calm, measured, carrying the kind of clarity that left no room for misinterpretation. Message received. She paused just long enough for the words to settle. Response is no. No elaboration. No negotiation. Just a statement of fact. Any hostile vessels entering Sol system will be treated accordingly. We advise immediate withdrawal. She inclined her head slightly. End transmission. The channel closed. Behind her, General Hale let out a quiet breath. Think they'll listen? Chen didn't answer immediately. Instead, she tapped a sequence into the console beside her. The system acknowledged with a soft tone. Unlikely, she said at last. The display shifted. New layers appeared over the solar map. Hidden structures, dormant networks, systems that had not been active in decades. Or at least, not visibly. Then we move to readiness, Hale said. Chen nodded. Protocol 7. That got a reaction. Not panic. Not hesitation. Just focus. Several officers straightened. Others immediately turned to their stations, fingers already moving across interfaces as long-dormant commands were executed. A voice from the tactical station spoke up. Admiral, Protocol 7 authorization requires full confirmation. Chen didn't hesitate. Confirmed. A brief pause. Protocol 7 activated. Nothing happened. At least, nothing visible. But across the system, things began to wake up. On the lunar surface, structures buried beneath layers of regolith shifted as power surged through ancient systems. Massive rails, long mistaken for geological formations, adjusted by fractions of a degree. Deep within asteroid mining zones, automated facilities paused their normal operations. Fabrication lines halted, then restarted with entirely different schematics. Ships that had spent years breaking rock began receiving new instructions. New purposes. In orbit, Satellites altered positions subtly, forming patterns that had not been seen in 2 centuries. And if nothing changed. Not yet. Cities remained lit. Civilian traffic continued. People moved through their lives without interruption. From the outside, it still looked like a peaceful world. Inside the command chamber, the updates began to flow. Lunar batteries online. Asteroid belt facilities responding. Orbital grid syncing to defensive configuration. Hale watched the report scroll in, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Always wondered if we'd ever actually use this, he said. Chin didn't smile. We hoped we wouldn't. Another officer turned from their station. Deep space recall signal prepared, Admiral. Chin nodded once. Transmit. A coded pulse left the system. Not a message. A signal. Simple. Direct. Unmistakable. Wherever human ships had gone, beyond mapped space, beyond established routes, into regions most species avoided, that signal would reach them. And they would understand it. Estimated response time? Hale asked. Variable, the officer replied. Nearest units within weeks. Buzz, longer. Chin accepted that without comment. They would come. They always did. The room settled into a steady rhythm of activity. No raised voices. No rushed orders. Just efficient movement, each person already knowing what needed to be done. Hale glanced back at the main display. Think they know? He asked. Chin followed his gaze. Beyond the edge of the solar map, a faint marker indicated the last known position of the incoming fleet. They know what they told us, she said. And what we told them? She was quiet for a moment. They didn't listen. Another update chimed. Admiral, Council channel requesting contact. Chen considered that briefly. Then nodded. Put it through. The image of an ancient figure formed above the console, calm, composed, watching her with eyes that had seen too much history repeat itself. Admiral, the elder said. Elder, Chen replied. A brief pause passed between them. Not awkward. Just understood. You've received the ultimatum, the elder said. We have. And your response? Chen didn't look away. You already know. A faint shift in the elder's expression, something almost like regret. Yes, he said. We do. Silence lingered for a second longer. Then the elder spoke again. The council will not intervene. I didn't expect you to. Another pause. Then more quietly, preparations have begun, the elder added, for the aftermath. Chen's gaze hardened slightly. That won't be necessary, she said. The elder tilted his head. Admiral? We're not planning an aftermath, Chen replied. Just a fraction of a second. That was all it took for the meaning to settle. Understanding. Not confusion. The elder inclined his head slowly. Of course, he said. The connection ended. Hale let out a low breath. They're already writing obituaries, he said. Chen turned back to the display, her expression unreadable. Then they're early, she replied. Outside, beyond the quiet blue of Earth and the silent readiness of everything surrounding it, something vast was approaching. Confident, certain, and completely unprepared for what it was about to meet. The fleet of the Dominion of Karth entered the Sol system in perfect formation. To their sensors, it looked exactly as expected. 1 star. 8 planets. Scattered infrastructure. Modest traffic patterns. A civilization that had barely stretched beyond its home system. Nothing unusual. Nothing threatening. Emperor Virex stood at the center of his flagship's command platform, watching the system resolve across the main display. His posture was relaxed, his expression carrying the quiet satisfaction of a campaign already won. Report, he said. Primary scans complete, his tactical officer replied. System defenses are present, but limited. Orbital platforms around the 3rd planet. Minor installations on surrounding bodies. No large-scale fleet concentrations detected. A faint smile crossed Virex's face. As predicted. Beside him, Fleet Marshal Dren paused, studying the incoming data more carefully. My Emperor, he said slowly, there are irregularities in the readings. Virex did not look at him. Clarify. The distribution of their assets, Dren continued. It's too even. Coverage extends across all approach vectors. There are no obvious weak points. That is not irregular, Virex replied. It is inefficient. They lack the capability to concentrate force, so they spread it thinly. Dren didn't argue. But he didn't look convinced either. Open channel, Virex ordered. Moments later, the system complied. This is Emperor Virex of the Dominion of Karth, he announced, his voice carried across the void with unmistakable authority. You have entered the final stage of negotiation. Surrender your world and your species will be relocated with minimal disruption. The pause. This is Admiral Sarah Chin, Solar Defense Force. Her voice was calm. Too calm. You have entered Sol System with hostile intent, she continued. Withdraw immediately. Virex allowed himself a small laugh. Admiral, he said almost pleasantly, you misunderstand your position. You do not have the capacity to issue demands. Then leave, Chin replied. The simplicity of the answer lingered for half a second longer than expected. Virex's smile thinned. No, he said. Understood, Chin replied. The channel closed. Dren exhaled slowly. That was brief. It was unnecessary, Virex said. Begin forward advance. Standard engagement pattern. The fleet responded instantly. Thousands of vessels adjusted formation, tightening their approach toward the inner system. Weapons systems powered up. Fighter bays opened. Energy signatures climbed as targeting arrays locked onto their designated objectives. Controlled. Unstoppable. Contact, the tactical officer said sharply. Virex turned slightly. Report. Multiple signatures appearing across the system. Not emerging from planetary surfaces, these are inbound. The main display shifted. And for the first time since entering the system, Virex frowned. Points of light flared into existence across the map. Dozens. Hundreds. Then thousands. They didn't emerge from a single location. They appeared everywhere. Outer system. Mid-range orbits. Behind asteroid clusters. Along vectors that had been empty seconds before. Fleet Marshal Dren leaned forward. That's not possible, he said under his breath. Identification, Virex snapped. The tactical officer's hands moved rapidly across the interface. Unknown, he replied. These vessels are not in our database. Configuration inconsistent with previously observed human designs. The display zoomed in. The ships were from. Some were massive, far larger than anything their intelligence reports had suggested humans could construct. Others were irregular, asymmetrical, carrying structures that didn't match any known engineering logic. And their energy signatures. Report, Virex demanded again. Unstable, the officer said. Or unfamiliar. These systems don't match any standard power profiles. A new signal cut through the confusion. Dominion Fleet, a voice said. Notchin. Different. Comma. This is Captain Elias Thorne, Deep Exploration Command. Virex narrowed his eyes. Deep exploration? You're partially correct about one thing, Thorne continued. We didn't build all of this ourselves. Another voice joined in. This is Captain Imani Rao. Some of it we traded for. And some, a third voice added, quieter but colder, we took from species that made the same mistake you're making now. The channel remained open. Deliberately. So every ship in the Dominion fleet could hear. We've been out there, Thorne said. Past your borders. Past your maps. Places your kind doesn't go. Rao continued seamlessly. We found ruins older than your entire empire. We found technologies your scientists would call impossible. And we found enemies, the third voice finished. Stronger than you. Silence followed. Not from the humans. From the Dominion. Because the data on the screens, it was starting to match the words. Energy spike detected, the tactical officer said, voice tightening. Multiple human vessels charging weapons. How many? Virex demanded. The officer hesitated. All of them. Fleet Marshal Dren's gaze never left the display. "My Emperor," he said quietly, "we should reassess." "We will not," Virex cut him off. "Deploy fighters. Target their forward elements. Break their formation before they can." "Formation," the tactical officer repeated, almost involuntarily. Virex snapped his attention back to the display and realized there was no formation. The human fleet wasn't arranged in lines, or wings, or any structure he recognized. They were positioned everywhere, independently, and yet perfectly coordinated. "Command vessel identification?" Virex demanded. "Unable to determine," the officer replied. "No central node detected." "That's impossible." Another signal came through. Admiral Chen again. "Emperor Virex," she said, "you have 30 seconds to withdraw your fleet." He stared at the display, at the ships, at the readings that no longer made sense. "No," he said again. "Understood." The pause. 30 seconds. Dren stepped closer, his voice low. "My Emperor, we should consider." 20 seconds. Virex didn't move. 15. His jaw tightened. 10. Around him, the bridge had gone completely silent. Even the crew, even the systems, seemed to hesitate. 5. Virex's hands curled slightly at his sides. 4. Dren closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. 3. The tactical officer swallowed. 2. Virex drew in a breath. 1. The humans opened fire. The first impact didn't make sense. There was no visible projectile, no beam crossing the void, no warning flare on the sensors that matched any known weapons system. One moment, the Dominion battleship Iron Vow was holding position in the forward line. Then it wasn't. The display flickered as the ship's signature simply vanished. "Report," Virex demanded. The tactical officer stared at his console, hands frozen for half a second too long. "Direct hit," he said. "Unknown weapon." Shields did not register impact. Another ship disappeared. Then another. No explosions. No debris fields expanding outward in predictable patterns. Just sudden, precise removal. Like pieces being erased from a board. "Return fire." Virex snapped. The Dominion fleet responded instantly. Energy cannons discharged in coordinated volleys, streaks of light crossing the darkness toward the human positions. Or where the human positions had been. Because they weren't there anymore. "They're moving," the officer said. "No, correction, they're repositioning." "That is movement," Virex snapped. "Negative," the officer replied, voice tightening. "They're not traveling between points. They're appearing at new coordinates without transit." Dren felt a chill run through him. "That's not possible," he said. On the display, human vessels flickered in and out of existence, reappearing at angles that made targeting solutions obsolete before they could be completed. Dominion weapons fired into empty space. Human weapons did not miss. A beam, if it could even be called that, cut through 3 escort vessels in a single pass. Their shields flared for less than a second before collapsing entirely, hulls separating with surgical precision. "Kinetic signatures detected," another officer called out. "High-velocity objects." The sentence ended abruptly as the forward screen showed one of their carriers buckle inward, its structure collapsing as if struck by something moving too fast to properly register. "Where did that come from?" Virex demanded. "No origin point detected." "Then find one." "There isn't one." The bridge filled with overlapping reports now, each more chaotic than the last. Port flank collapsing. Shield harmonics failing, unknown interference. Multiple system breaches, internal sensors compromised. Virex gripped the edge of his command platform. This was wrong. This was completely wrong. "Focus fire," he ordered, forcing his voice steady. "Concentrate all weapons on a single target. Destroy it." The fleet complied. Thousands of weapons locked onto one human vessel, large, clearly visible, its energy signature far beyond anything else in the immediate area. "Fire." The void lit up. For a moment, It looked like the entire fleet had struck true. Energy converged on the target in a storm of coordinated destruction. Then the light faded. The ship was still there. Its shields hadn't flared. They hadn't even reacted. "That's not possible," someone whispered. The human vessel shifted slightly. Not evasively. Casually. And returned fire. A pulse expanded outward, not explosive, not violent in appearance. Just a distortion. When it passed through the Dominion formation, systems went dark. Not destroyed. Disabled. Entire ships drifted, powerless, their weapons offline, their engines unresponsive. "Status!" Virex shouted. Multiple vessels non-operational. Systems offline across entire sectors. "How?" "No damage detected. Systems are just gone." Dren stared at the display, understanding dawning too late. "They're not trying to destroy us," he said. Virex turned sharply. "What?" "They're dismantling us," Dren replied, his voice hollow. Another transmission cut through the chaos. "Admiral Chen." "Emperor Virex," she said, her tone unchanged despite the destruction unfolding around them. "Your fleet has lost 73% of its operational capacity." Virex's eyes snapped back to the display. "The numbers? They couldn't be right." "Impossible," he said. "Accurate," Chen replied. "You have one remaining option. Power down your weapons and prepare for surrender." A Dominion cruiser nearby attempted to break formation, its engines flaring as it tried to retreat toward the outer system. It didn't make it far. A human ship appeared directly in its path, no approach, no warning, and fired once. The cruiser didn't explode. It stopped. Every system cut simultaneously, leaving it drifting, intact but helpless. "For minutes," Chen continued. "That's how long this engagement has lasted so far." Virex felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. "This is not possible," he said again, quieter now. "We told you to leave," Chen replied. Another wave of human attacks rippled through the fleet. Precise. Targeted. Every strike removed capability. Weapons. Engines. Sensors. Nothing more. No excess. No waste. The Dominion ships that remained active began to falter, their formations breaking down under pressure that no doctrine had prepared them for. "Command structure compromised," an officer said. "We can't maintain coordination." "Re-establish it." Virex snapped. "How?" The officer shot back before he could stop himself. "They're everywhere." That was the problem. There was no front line. No rear. No safe position. Every vector was contested. Every assumption invalid. 2 minutes, Chen said. Dren stepped closer to the Emperor, his voice low, urgent. "My Emperor, we cannot win this." Virex didn't respond. He couldn't. Because for the first time in his life, he believed it. Another report came in. Flagship shields holding, but the sentence cut off as the display shifted again. A human vessel had appeared directly ahead of them. Close. Too close. Its structure was unlike anything they had faced before. Layered, asymmetrical, its surface shifting with faint energy patterns that didn't correspond to any known material. Its weapons powered up. Shields to maximum. Virex ordered. "They already are." The human ship fired. The impact wasn't violent. It didn't shake the flagship. It didn't tear through the hull. Simply turned everything off. Lights flickered. Systems died. The hum of the engines vanished. For a brief, impossible moment, silence filled the bridge. Every display went dark except one. A single communication channel. Admiral Chen's voice came through, steady as ever. "Engagement complete," she said. Virex stared at the dead consoles around him. At the silent crew. At the realization settling in with crushing clarity. "How long," he asked, his voice barely audible, "did that take?" There was a pause. 4 hours, Chen replied. Not 4 minutes. Not a brief exchange. A complete dismantling of the most powerful fleet his empire had ever assembled. Reduced to nothing. Without being destroyed. "Prepare to be boarded," Chen continued. "You will be taken into custody. Your crew will not be harmed." Virex lowered himself slowly onto his command seat. Around him, the remains of his empire's strength drifted in the void. Intact. Helpless. Gone. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a single thought repeated itself. This wasn't a war. It had never been a war. It was a lesson.